Oh my god, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, it's Thursday, January 27th, 2011, and that is a hard thing to say. It is the Day 9 Daily, it is D9D number 249, where we learn to be a better gamer. Ugh, that was some of my knuckles still finding room to crack. I was hoping my knuckles would crack right when I made that pause, but alas, it failed. So we're here today, ready to do an exciting game, per usual. I did want to make some very exciting announcements. First of all, for any of you who have never watched this show live, when we're, getting ready to go live, I play music beforehand, and I was just playing some funky beats, and Total Biscuit himself identified one of the songs from Guardian Heroes. That's what we call the bond of the gamers. If you have not played Guardian Heroes on the Sega Saturn, sell everything you own, drop out of college, and take your parents' tuition money, buy a Saturn and Guardian Heroes, and your life will be perfect. It will be so good. I'm so excited. Also, I see people commenting on my Shanghai Ping Pong shirt. Shanghai Ping Pong Classic 1962. It's really hard to figure out where to point because my camera's reversed on my screen. It also has like a tear here, but this is only because I was grooming a unicorn and it got, kind of leaned into me and slashed me. I had to dodge out of the way. It's not a big deal though. It ended up being fine in the end. Really what happened is I was flexing, and it was just, my neck muscles are so big, it just got a little, it's not a big deal, it's actually fine. In very, very exciting news, I'd like to give a big shout out to all the fine folks at Facebook. I actually went up to the Facebook headquarters to do a cast of some in-house games, and it was so awesome. Because what's always kind of funny is that people like to look at the huge corporations, like Facebook. Oh, they have like $59 trillion a second in revenue and all this stuff. And then you go there, and everyone there is just a bunch of StarCraft players, like every other StarCraft player. So we played a whole bunch of StarCraft, and I continue to talk about StarCraft. And then they gave me a Facebook sticker and a Facebook sweater that's hanging in my closet that I shan't wear because, per usual, my room is 90 degrees during the cast of the daily. Shucks. So thanks, you guys are awesome. You guys kick ass. In today's game, what sort of mysteries are going to be unfolding? Well, I personally do not know. I would like to say for the record, I do not know, because I did not watch this game. All that happened to me was that I was on Battle.net 2.0, and I got the lovely message from KiwiKaki himself, who said, "Sup, dude, you want a cool game, dude?" And I was like, yes, I would like a cool game, dude. And he sent it to me via messenger pigeon, and we're going to watch it today. I do know a couple of interesting facts about it, but I'm not going to reveal those yet. Of course, because the Day 9 Daily is an educational sort of topic, I want to try to stress the idea of how a normal game ends up going to a crazy game. A normal game ends up going to a crazy game. So let's go ahead and start the game and just begin thinking about that. I'm not going to comment too much. Yes, I did. Oh yeah, look at that. Okay, by the way, let me just pause and note. Look at this. People just offering to give stuff because I only have a 300 gig internal. Okay, so on yesterday's daily, I went live late because I had 2 gigabytes left on my hard drive. When I hit the record button, my computer was like, I'm not recording anything, I'll crash. People now are just offering hard drives. I'm not sure if there's any other community that would do that other than the StarCraft community. It's like, he has a small hard drive. Let me fix that for him. It was a little bit shameful, though, because as you know, the size of your hard drive is kind of like the size of your penis. And I only had like a little 300 gigabyte hard drive. And I'm like, no, it's just my computer's well-cooled. It's not normally like that. Oh, but how embarrassing, and yet how reassuring that lovely people like this guy, Echo, yeah, the illustrious Echo. XlorD asking some provocative questions. What do you think about force fields? Oh, force... KiwiKaki balanced. Attaboy. I really think they're balanced, dude. So, what I want to do right now is try my best to ignore what these two players are saying, as entertaining as both of them are, and let's begin to point out the usual stuff. It's the right versus north position on Metalopolis. Let us note all the usual culprits in the outcome of this game. The usual things like close air distances. Oh my goodness. Mutalisks are going to be able to do lots and lots of damage, right? Oh, look at this pylon placement. Just allows him to barely pinch off entrances. That will help him constrict a Zergling movement. Oh, hey, looks like XlorD is going for a fast gas. I guess he's going to be getting some Zergling speed early on. I guess he's going to be doing that. Pause in time. Pause in time. Pause in time. Here is the way we are going to think about this game. Here's what we want to note. 99% of games end with a reasonable first or second attack. 99% of games. I would say that this is true for the Diamonders, the people who actually have good refined builds. For, you know, if you're like Platinum and lower, what'll happen is you'll have an approximation, there'll be some kind of swinginess, you know. Like, let's say you had a whole bunch of Marines and they were accidentally on moves, so they just died to a bunch of Banelings doing 0 damage. That's just one of those accidents that happens if you're at, like, you know, the silver or gold level, just because you're not used to playing that fast. But let's say you've gotten your speed up, your fundamentals are looking good, you have a fleshed out build. 99% of games will end with a reasonable play, or in a very reasonable fashion, like Zerg, who takes 4 bases and keeps denying the Protoss' third. Darn. Protoss loses because he only has 2 bases. The Protoss who goes 6 Warp Gate and just pushes the Zerg early and just kills the Zerg with that first attack. TT1 does that all the time if you've ever seen a stream. This is very, very, very common. And it's so important you acknowledge that 99% of games end in this simple, clean, easy fashion. So we watch this game that is not actually a short game. There's going to be a point where things kind of halt being your usual, oh, this is how I'm going to win. It stops being in that 99 percentile of games and turns into the magical 1% where we get the Mega Gosu stuff. So when that moment occurs and sort of how it gets there, I'm going to spend a lot of time focusing on. Until that point, I'm going to begin with the what is good about these players' builds and how are they going to try to win with some sort of standard mid-game thing that wins 99% of the time. Then I'm going to talk, you know, really a lot about that little slice in time where it transitions, and then of course all about their fancy endgame decision making. And because this game is a long one, I'm going to try to make sure that I do this at an appropriate pace. And as usual, because it is so important that you understand broad strokes and not little meticulous details, we're just going to note broad things. Here is the extractor going down before the pool, so he will thusly have 100 gas during everything. Pylon's going down for KiwiKaki. He has thrown down his cybernetics core. I don't know if this is the case for you, but for some reason my sounds are sounding extremely loud. And I'm hallucinating. Whoopsie daisies. I guess it's that Los Angeles tap water. There is the metabolic boost going down. Queen coming up. It looks like, oh, a gas steal by XlorD. This is perhaps the most weird thing that has happened this game yet. But you know what? This is so normal. Most of the time, Protosses want a faster second assimilator. They want to be able to get a lot of sentries up and expand. XlorD going to continue to pick it off. KiwiKaki being very smart, blocking with his Zealot. Of course, we have the expansion going down for XlorD. We have some Lings, just making sure nothing goofy happens to that side. Is there a second queen up? Is there a second queen up? Is there some sort of second queen? It doesn't look like it. Assimilator finally going down for KiwiKaki. 3 gates coming up. I'm really looking to see if anything noteworthy happens. Roachwarren going down. We'll end up pausing in just a moment once this warp gate finishes, because that is the very, very, very typical look to things. This is the very typical look to things. Alright. So, now that warp gates are getting up, great. Here is the expansion going down. Now, let's talk about looks, right? Let's talk about looks. I want everyone in the known universe to stop thinking about a build order as a list of food. I want them to stop thinking about it as a list of food. I want them to stop thinking of it as, oh, my build is 9 pylon, 13 gate, and 14 core, and then 16 pylon, and then 17 assimilator. I actually said everything completely out of order, but ignore me. You know, wow, whoopsie daisies. It's kind of fun to switch words and sentences because it sounds funny. If you switch them in one of those food lists, it sounds wrong. And that was. So, it's not a big deal. But, you know, people end up memorizing these lists Where they're like, okay, it's 22 food. Let me get my notepad. Okay, build that. And the real problem with that is that suddenly a lot of thinking doesn't happen. You know, I mean, even for instance, like my build that I misstated, where I went 13 gateway, 14 core. As it turns out, if you keep building probes, you will end up with around 17 or 18 food when you build that cybernetics core. Now, the way, like, oh my gosh, that mistake is going to be a very fortuitous example, because if you build a gateway on 13, the real way to think of it is the instant my gateway finishes, I build a cybernetics core, and I'm constantly making probes. So you'll notice that by stating it that way, it emphasizes how important it is to get my cyber core fast. It emphasizes how important it is to constantly be making probes. Cool! That's how you want to be thinking of things. So what I always advertise to people is to completely halt this food list setup and to think of their build in phases. So let's talk about the Zerg's phase. First, it opened up with 14 gas, 14 pool, getting speed, and getting a queen. Pretty simple. And then we want 2 bases up. We want 2 bases, right? We want 2 queens, a roach warren, and then a layer and an extractor. That's a lot easier. That's a lot more tractable for people to wrap their heads around, right? Because then what happens is after they get their queen and their speed, they're like, okay, well, let me get my expansion up. Man, I better be getting that queen because, again, that's a part of my second phase. I better start getting that roach warren because, oh, that's part of my second phase. Do I have anything left? Yeah, just getting the layer in the second gas. Done! All right, cool. And all of a sudden, people can begin deciding, well, do I want my roach warren a little earlier? Do I want it a little later? Do I want my layer a little earlier or a little later? Now you can have a little bit of wiggle room, and you can use your thinking when you're seeing what he's doing. You're not just going, oh no, he's attacking me, and I'm at 20 food. But I better wait till 25 to build my roach warren, because that's when my notepad says to do it. Don't do that. Don't follow the instruction sets. Follow the thought process. Likewise, the look for KiwiKaki's mid-game is to get 3 warp gates, followed by an expansion. The one little interesting thing is the fact that KiwiKaki is getting a forge coming up soon. So at this point in time, there's still some variety for what that quote-unquote usual way for them to win is. Virtually every build will have a point where 99% of the time you will end up winning. Looks like KiwiKaki is just going to be building the probes. I would like to just briefly note that KiwiKaki is still spending his Chrono Boost and appears to largely be on deep probes. There's some more sentries going down. Good stuff. Again, I want to speed this up just a little bit. XlorD is continuing to make more drones. You see the drones coming up. The speed Zerglings poking at the front. Another way of saying this is that the speed Zerglings are seeing, do I need to start making any units yet? We do see the roach speed going down. And the Hydra Den, that's kind of a fast Hydra Den. Most of the time, people are using just roaches and taking a third kind of fast. Stargate coming out from KiwiKaki. Whoa! Now, this is a little bit funky. Now, for the record, you heard me talk about phases. After a little while, we'll kind of see KiwiKaki do a little more than this Stargate, right? Because you heard me say the first phase was just getting 2 gases and a cyber core fast. The next phase was 3 warp gates and a nexus and a forge. And let's think about what the following phase is. We don't want it to be Stargate. We want to have a little bit more stuff in there. So let's go ahead and mute my phone and throw it onto my bed. Because people are texting me because I'm super popular. But of course, being popular is not as important as talking into a webcam over the internet. Alright, so let's kind of examine, let's kind of do this phase analysis from KiwiKaki. Yeah, sure, I'm noting that he's getting his Stargate up really fast, but okay, so I'm seeing the Robo go down. Is there going to be any plus anything upgrade occurring? Yep, here comes the +1. So generally what I say for the next phase is Stargate, +1, and Robo. I just sort of break it down like that. Very, very easy methodology to get a good sense of broad general builds, because I'm not going to lie, I do not have that many builds perfected, but I am amazingly good at winging things, and it's all thanks to this, just breaking it down into super broad phases and remembering, oh yeah, I got to make probes, oh yeah, I got to make probes, oh yeah, I got to make pylons. So it looks like KiwiKaki is going to be going for a mothership. Nice. Mothership push coming up. Okay, cool. Mothership coming up. And we're going to see, looks like XlorD is continuing to make roaches and hydras, has not really taken another expansion. Now, you'll notice what happened with the tone of my voice. I was like, he's getting a mothership. He's getting a mothership. My Starcraft2 just total arousal began when I saw the mothership. But again, we want to calm ourselves down. Let us assume for the time being that this is the year 2015 and a 2-base mothership play is so standard I couldn't believe it. Everyone goes 2-base mothership. That's the way you want to view a strategy. What KiwiKaki is doing is not amazing or cool or nifty because the fact that it's, innovative or anything like that. Things are either good or bad because they're good or bad, and that's how we want to think of it. Now, what I'm going to tell you right now is right when this mothership pops up, and we end up getting a decent amount of gateway units. We see KiwiKaki beginning to get more gateways. He may very well invest in some sort of maybe Immortals or Colossi. Nope, doesn't look like it. He's just going to be going for all that sort of good jazz. So let's talk about typical mid-games. Now, how is Zerg going to win? You heard me say at the start of this, 99% of games end with a typical style of play. 99% of your games will end in kind of a boring way. For Zerg, the boring way is that Zerg's going to get a 3rd base, and around the time Zerg is getting his 4th base, Zerg's going to have so many roaches and hydras and likely some corruptors that he will prevent our Protoss from taking his 3rd, and at that point Protoss will die. Right? Let me even sum that up in a smaller fashion. 99% of Zerg vs. Protosses will end up with a multiple base Zerg preventing a Protoss from getting a 3rd base. Done. In this circumstance, it's roaches, hydras, and corruptors. Cool. The way KiwiKaki's play is going to work is he's going to get this mothership and a whole lot of blink stalkers and probably do a big push that will likely wrap it up. And I'm going to try to be identifying these parts. For the most part, what we've seen right now is typical builds that haven't really done anything noteworthy yet. Or again, we don't know if the mothership is typical or untypical. We just know we want to look at it in terms of good versus bad. KiwiKaki's making a good amount of stuff to stay alive. He's getting blink. You see a lot of these gateways coming out right now. Lots of good jazz. The mothership arrives. Oh, yes. Expansion coming up right now for XlorD. And hey, look at this. XlorD is beginning to show signs of the most basic, 99% of the time style of ending games. He is trying to block this bottom base. And in the meantime, he has double evolution chamber. They're not doing anything quite yet. There's the 3rd base going down by KiwiKaki. And around now is when... now we're starting to see some actual action occur. This is generally when games start to wrap up. This is starting from now, maybe to the next 4 minutes, is when games actually begin to end. And we want to just note this. Like, in a lot of circumstances... Oh, look at that. That's awesome. Look how many overseers that is. LOL. A lot of the time, we see this Roach Hydra drop end the game. In way many circumstances. Oh, yeah. Look at the Vortex sucking them in. The overseers were there to see all the units get kind of absorbed. So, a lot of times the Zerg would win here, and a lot of times the Protoss would defend and do a counterattack, right? Cool. Looks like KiwiKaki's play was super effective. Did end up losing. Did that Forge end up finishing the +1 armor? No, he managed to pick that off. That's a nice little win there by Zerg. There's the expansion up. Zerg's continuing to build stuff. Now, sometimes you'll end up with a Protoss who does get 3 bases, and instead will be a 4-base Zerg, trying to deny the 4th base of Protoss. And here comes KiwiKaki's very fun, goofy tactics. How much energy does he have on that mothership? Where is the mothership? There it is. Doesn't quite have enough energy. Well, KiwiKaki loves doing fancy stuff with these sorts of blink stalkers. Loves doing fancy stuff. Now, here is an interesting moment in the game. At this point, one of 2 things happens in Protoss's mind. One of 2 things generally happens. He either picks off these hatches by blinking around and then pulling back with a recall, or he continues to poke at Zerg and prevents Zerg from really getting this 4th base up, and then Zerg sort of eventually just runs out of stuff. And this is where games tend to transition from this easy peasy mid-gamey style, where you win 99% of the time to the late game. So we're going to advance a little farther forward, and I want to just kind of note when this moment ends up happening. Here's the blink in, okay, and he kills it off, and there's the mass recall to pull back. Very cool. We've already seen this in one KiwiKaki game before. We're seeing it in this one yet again. And the re-expand. Okay, good. We're at the 18-minute mark, which is generally where I want to just stop looking and just kind of noting what's going on. And note what sort of occurs in a majority sense. From the Zerg's point of view, we saw a usual... Okay, for both players, I want to do the following three things. I want to note what their opening was. I want to note how most of the games will end. We'll spend most of the time on that second point. And then, why it didn't really end. Why it didn't really end. We'll do that for both players. Let's do it for the Zerg. How did Zerg open? With this kind of a usual Roach Hydra mix. He was going for a third base. Usually, the way that Zerg is going to be ending this game is by denying the third for Protoss, by doing a huge drop that cripples Protoss, and then Zerg just kind of follows up in an intuitive fashion. And a lot of people will not perceive when this occurs, you know, when, okay, he's crippled. Like, sometimes a drop will occur in the main and you'll kill off all his gateways. Okay, so he can't make any units. So you can actually just keep flooding and kill him. Or you can expand and there's nothing he can do about it. In fact, any decision you make after you've killed all his gateways is going to win you the game. But what happened in this particular circumstance is that the drop didn't really do that much damage. The third base got up, but Protoss also didn't have a big army. So in other words, the killing blow didn't happen here with the drop. The killing blow didn't happen here with the Nexus. But there's also no killing blow incoming from KiwiKaki. Likewise, from KiwiKaki's point of view, he opened up with a very typical fast expand and eventually got into this mothership. How do games usually end for a Protoss who does this? Well, the usual ending is he blinks and kills off a whole bunch of the hatcheries and then mass recalls out. Or there's just a direct huge attack at the front and he wins that way. Or KiwiKaki denies the Zerg more and more and more expansions and then just eventually has so much economy he wins. This is how most games normally end, is so straightforward. However, XlorD really has just a few too many units, and because of the distances on this map and how good XlorD has been about defending, it ends up going to a little bit of a later stage of play. And at this point in time, I still think that people should have a set of very, very simple goals that they want to do again and again and again. So, we could say something like KiwiKaki wants to do non-stop Blink Stalker harassment to deny expansions and to recall out while building up a big Templar army. There was a Templar Archives somewhere. There it is. While building up a big Templar Archives army. That would be very, very, very fancy. We also see double upgrades coming up. Zerg will now do kind of a typical later game stage where we'll obviously want to be getting some Broodlords because those are awesome. KiwiKaki continuing to expand. And KiwiKaki is actually playing quite a bit passively. And here is the phase in gameplay where people do not have a lot of experience, where they do not have a lot of experience. Wow, my goodness. I have a Protoss who's walled off one of the bases with a bunch of cannons and warp gates. Wow, I'm against a Zerg who has this sort of huge army and managed to get a fourth base up. This is very unusual. Super duper duper unusual for both players, because generally Protoss has won already, or generally Zerg has won already. So we want to be thinking kind of clearly about how we want to play this out. I honestly think that the Protoss set of decision-making is somewhat straightforward from this point in time. He wants to be, you know, splitting up his mothership with the rest of his army, because he can do very cool recall plays. He wants to be trying to do harass with his Blink Stalkers, just generally expanding more and trying to keep Zerg battered down. Some force fields get thrown down. Whoopsie daisies, there's a mothership going this way. And look, here comes a very nice tactic. Okay, now I want, actually 1 second to go is where I wanted to pause it, right here. As unfamiliar of a situation as any of you might think this is, you can state pretty simply, attack with an army along one lane and do a mothership harass along the other one for recall. That's a pretty simple game plan. That's a pretty simple game plan, and that's fine to end up trying to work with. There's nothing wrong with that. This is a fine play to do to try to get over here. But for the most part, later stage play really revolves around denying expansion. So I'm going to try to talk about that as much as possible. First of all, this kicks ass. He's moving right on up. Let's see how long it takes for him to get the force field. There, squeezes through the little sentry. Go, little sentry, go. Oh, it doesn't really look like he's going to do it. Oops. Mothership fell pretty hard. And actually, very impressive play by XlorD. Actually crushed that pretty easily. And one of the reasons why I think this is very effective is that defensively, he's linking everything together with these pre-tuners. Pretty obvious play. Looks like the Stalkers are going to barely live in this circumstance. XlorD's going to come. He's going to shut it down. Clean it up, no problem. KiwiKaki continuing to upgrade. And after this attack, ends up finally getting eliminated. And we even see that these fires coming down. I want to note something really fast. This mix by XlorD is not that unusual. In fact, it's really normal. As normal as can be. I mean, Corruptor Roach Hydra? Yeah? Yeah, sound familiar? It should, because that's like what Zergs do. Okay, cool. Good, we've established that point. Now, you'll notice that I'm still trying to speak as calmly as possible, right? I'm still trying to be like, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. Now, that was fucking kick-ass. Yes, he recalled cross-map. Even I drooled, tried to inhale, and it ejected saliva into my lungs. That's how excited that was. Let me drink my water. Jesus. Alright. So, that excites people. Seeing a mothership come up excites people. As a super hardcore player who loves fleshing out details, it excites me the fact that KiwiKaki, in going for this mothership play, got a Void Ray in between. In other words, he used that Void Ray as a stepping stone to get to the mothership. This is all brilliant stuff. However, never neglect how very straightforward the core is. A Blink Stalker Templar army with lots of upgrades. Simple. KiwiKaki just said, could I work a mothership in there, and spend a lot of time trying to figure out a way to get a mothership in there, and he did a good job, as we're seeing in this game. He already has 4 bases, and has kind of made Zerg a little bit leery. Great, it's very effective, it seems good, right? But never ignore that sort of fundamental core. Looks like the hero is being revived at the town hall. Very good. Because it's high level, it'll take a long time to come back. KiwiKaki making a lot of stalkers, dude. Looks like +3 weapons are down. Good. Another expansion coming up. Now, what bothers me about this right here is that Zerg has no spotting of this at all. The #1 fundamental mistake made, like, universally is that when we get to a late game, you gotta just watch all the bases. And you gotta be aware. I mean, come on. Where else would he be expanding? Come on! And it looks like KiwiKaki is expanding with 2 eyes and a nose. That's great. Oh, XlorD doing a good job thinking on the defense. But again, you also want to just be thinking about how to deny expos. Obviously, this sort of thing is going to be good. The Broodlord cocoon, right? Getting the Broodlords up because they're good in a typical army. But I still want you to just note that you gotta be watching for those nexuses. Even having something like 1 Nidus Worm or just 1 Overlord pooping creep out to make it somewhat inconvenient is essential. Is absolutely essential. So we do see there's a good amount of movement coming out by KiwiKaki. And where's the mothership? It's somewhere here. Is the mothership? No, it's actually nowhere anywhere. It's right there in the production tab. Sorry, I derped there. Derp. Now, this is actually, I think, a very interesting play by XlorD. The fact that he is moving along into the main with the Broodlords straight up, separating it from his army. I want to see how this ends up playing out, because as spaces get a little bit wider, as you end up getting worried about things like, you know, an attack over here and an attack over here at the same time. Ooh, and that's fantastic, doing some more gooping up on that. I actually kind of like XlorD's play here. I would prefer, though, that there was a push happening here instead of here. Is that necessarily true? Let's end up seeing how it plays out. That's actually kind of close. That's kind of close. Whether he should be pushing the main or should be pushing over here. I suppose the fact that XlorD knows that KiwiKaki's army is on this left side makes it a little more okay to end up, you know, pushing over here with these really slow units. I mean, the worst thing ever is when you push up here with Broodlords and all his Stalkers are right there and they blink underneath and then you just lose. But XlorD is playing very interestingly defensively. Just a little bit unusually defensively, I would say. The fact that he's done absolutely no denying of expansions. This is of course, looking pretty effective. Mothership, which tragically had its Purifier being reduced. But man, Broodlords are just brutal to deal with. And XlorD, though, whether it's a better idea to attack over here or to attack over here, I think picks up on a very key idea, which is that with a Mothership army, or with any sort of late-game Protoss army, having it split up is not so good. Having it really widely split up is kind of actually bad. So if the Zerg can hit a lot of distinct points at once, it can be very difficult for Protoss to be able to heal. This is, again, the part where a lot of players do not end up making the best decisions. They will continue to try to drill one location on the map. They will get their big max Zerg army and try to pair it against the big max Protoss army. And oh, XlorD preparing for a drop. This is fantastic. This is so great. Notice how XlorD... Oh, no, he's not. It would be great if he did do a drop. He could absolutely finish off the main. Oh, be careful! Ah, XlorD. XlorD. He's going to pull back. He's going to go ahead and crush everything with the insane range on those bad boys. KiwiKaki throwing down as many gateways as he so can. A drop or an attack at the front is basically going to be effectively the same thing because there's nothing really to drop over here. But this is the way to play late-game Zerg. This is the way to play late-game Zerg, right? This is the way to play late-game Zerg. The way to play late-game Zerg is the following. As many of you have discovered, there is something called the 300 food push, which is where you're maxed with Zerg. You continue to add larvae, continue to add larvae, continue to add larvae, continue to add larvae, and then you attack with everything, you have $5,000 in the bank, and as things are dying, you're just holding like, 5 SR and just maxing on roaches. And then you steamroll them, not with your initial push that dies, but with the extra 100 food worth of stuff that you made, the 300 food push. But what's also important is not that economic thing, but also the tactical idea of poking here, poking along this side, poking here, maybe poking here, and then when one starts to weaken, that's when you drill it. So XlorD doing a very smart thing, and he's beginning to drill this main. He's managed to take off a lot of structures, and he has cupped the Protoss player back into this corner. Now, at this point in time, the important thing for KiwiKaki to do is to just obviously not die. But as you're not dying, still keep a little bit of an eye on these expansions. That is always the important technique that you want to be doing as we're getting these later on expansions. There's the +++ ups going down. XlorD conquering his little half of the map. Going to be investing in the gold soon, but honestly, XlorD's probably going to need this gold if he wants to be able to close out this game. As KiwiKaki just has an extraordinarily intimidating force, in particular with these Archons, because for those of you who didn't know, Archons are amazing against Zerg. Here comes XlorD streaming up. He's going to try to pick off this southern expansion, and I'm half okay with this. Let's see how this battle ends up churning out. Oh, very cool. Just as the Vortex on the Broodlords. Here's some more tactical brilliance by XlorD. Well, if my army's split with half in the Vortex and half out, I'll just put everything in the Vortex. Victory. Uh-oh. Oh my god, is KiwiKaki going to do the Archon Toilet? The Archon Toilet. Oh my god. Oh my god. And there is the... Oh my gosh, that's always so awesome. The Archon Toilet. The Archon Toilet. Alright, I love to analyze. I love to try to be as objective and clear and pure and analytic as possible. But ladies and gentlemen, that was an Archon Toilet. Blinking the Stalkers out of the way. Look at the food, 193 to 130. I would say that that went over well for Protoss. I would say that dropping 30 food versus your opponent dropping 80 food is good, is very good. And here comes the blink. That's a no-go for your Rochos. Very kick-ass. Very, very, very kick-ass. Holy crap. That's actually, I think, now, that actually is so strong that that might become a common late-game tactic against virtually every race, is to do some sort of huge, obvious, straight-up push, but throw in a mothership. Oh, yeah, and go for the Archon Toilet. the Toilet of Archons to close everything off. So, looks like XlorD's going to go ahead and try to pinch this off again as some Hydras coming in. The KiwiKaki Stalker count is a little bit too great, so he's going to end up pulling everything back, obviously taking more resources. Now, here comes, I think that was kind of a reasonable decision by XlorD. He had this huge army here, he just done a lot of damage, why not try to pierce there? What XlorD really needs to do is begin hitting this vulnerable main, and kind of alternating between attacks here and on this other flank. The main is a significant worry and a big concern for the Protoss. KiwiKaki tries to expand mid. It's obviously not going to be a go. Hatch continuing to be produced. A lot of gateways going on, observers coming out. Huge army from KiwiKaki. But the one thing that I think is a lot of a mistake, kind of a big mistake that is a big problem to fall into, is the fact that these Zealots and Stalkers are cheap units money-wise, but expensive units food-wise. In an example, let's consider the Dark Templar right here. This guy, the Dark Templar. A Dark Templar is like 125, and it costs like 2 food. A Zealot costs 100 minerals, and it costs 2 food. They both cost the same amount of food, but one of them is expensive on money. You are expensive on money, and the other one is cheap on money. You want to be, as you get to the max point, having fewer Zealots and fewer Stalkers and more Archons and Immortals and Colossi and Void Rays and Motherships, these power units. So going for this army mix is only okay if you are intending to be extremely aggressive and, for instance, do a Protoss-style 300 food push. Here comes a not big drop by Zerg. Oh my gosh, and look, here comes everything getting blunked up. There's the Smart Blink popping up. Why is there no attack here? What are you... XlorD! Oh, no! Oh, that was such a clear play. Oh, all these guys should have just waltzed right in, because look how KiwiKaki committed everything back. Look, units are still struggling to get out. Ah! Yeah, you want to be doing a lot of multi-pronged attacks. With Protoss, you can get away with not doing multi-pronged attacks, but doing a little bit more of direct, straight-up, straightforward pushing, as we can see. This is going to be, for the most part, relatively difficult to stop. But KiwiKaki doing the right thing when he's getting maxed with these units that are expensive on food, but cheap on money. He's going to be pushing as aggressively as possible. Only pushing very, very aggressively. You don't want to sit around with a big Stalker and Zealot force. Continuing to advance, continuing to pick things off. Looks like we have a lot of Ultralists that are en route. KiwiKaki doing some more of his Blink Stalkerness. Is there a Mothership lurking around anywhere? No, it looks like he ended up abandoning that ship. Looks like, yep, no Mothership in sight. And this is actually getting to be a little bit of an awkward position for our Protoss hero, KiwiKaki. Because he doesn't really have any of those tactics anymore, he can only really do straight-up standard gateway type stuff. And for once, I actually think that that might not be the worst idea. And I don't say that because there's just this giant-ass army here. I say that because as resources begin to get low, all decision-making revolves around the expansions. So many people like to think the idea that StarCraft is a game about efficiency. You want to make the most efficient unit mix possible. Not actually true. Marines and Marauders are not as efficient as a mech army. Tanks are super efficient for what they cost. However, Marines and Marauders give you so much mobility that you can take a ton of expansions. And sometimes you'll see like a 5-basing Terran against a 2-basing Terran. And the 5-basing Terran's going Marine Marauders, the 2-basing Terran's going bunch of siege tanks, and it's still really, really close. Because one player is being inefficient, and the other player is being very efficient. But one of them is just investing so much more money. So in this circumstance, as the game's getting later and later and later and later, you want to be denying as many expansions as possible, so that way you can just overrun your opponent, whether you're being efficient or not. But the instant you start to be a little dry on expansions, it can become quite clear who's the person who needs to be doing the attacking and who doesn't. In this circumstance, KiwiKaki does really not need to be attacking, because look at the mineral count for Zerg. Zerg's low on money. Zerg is just started to mine here, but you'll notice some of these patches are already like close to half mined out. KiwiKaki, a little low on money, doing pretty good, but has a much bigger army in this established center. Protoss, if he actually just sits, because Protoss armies, again, are a little bit more efficient than Zerg armies, Protoss doesn't actually need to do too much committal to this attack. So what Protoss would be very beneficial to do is to cannon up the center, just poke to try to deny this expansion. And now the key point in this entire map becomes this expansion for Zerg, and Protoss' attempts to deny that. Protoss will likely not care about this as much, because there's no more real resources to take. When both players are sort of expanding along the sides of the map, you know, Zerg should be poking here, try to shut down that sort of mining, try to get an economic lead, try to puncture some hole. Really, at this point, KiwiKaki can easily just defend this point on the map and be pretty okay. So long, again, as he can end up denying this. Protoss does not actually need to do any pushing into his opponent's main. There's the drones getting taken down. Doing a little bit more blinking action. Yes. Oh, Spinecrawler's going down by XlorD. That's cool. But, I mean, notice the resource differences. This is the real issue with the Zerg player at this point in the game, is that he'll tend to be broke. The Protoss will tend to have a lot of money, and also this army by XlorD is possible to be taken down if Protoss has the right mix. All Stalkers is pretty easy to take down if you also have that fungal growth in there. As we are seeing, Protoss is getting way easily repelled. Despite the fact that this is the most important part on the map, and KiwiKaki's whole focus is going to be on keeping this alive, Nidus Worm, drop, do some attacking along this side. We see this whole main is gone, and it did do a good amount of damage to KiwiKaki, but XlorD suddenly has become a little bit too passive and too defensive. KiwiKaki's trying to push out as much as he can and trying to like grip and hold on. And I think that this decision to get a lot of gateway units up was a smart choice. As he's trying to pull back in recovery, he needs a fastly replenishable army. He doesn't need this set of power units like a whole bunch of Colossi or Immortals. He needs to get mobility and he needs to not die, so that's obviously why he's going to make those gateway units. So now we see XlorD beginning to load up. I'm still always so concerned about this sort of one-shot style, where it's like, alright, I'm going to go drop here, hope it works. Alright, it didn't work. Alright, let me attack here, hope it works, and all that sort of good stuff. We see this attack moving in here. Here comes some roaches unloading, and we're immediately just noticing KiwiKaki's having a little bit of trouble pulling his army all the way back and getting it organized in the fashion that he wants. And when it finally does show up, well, you know it, some gateways are getting taken down. This is not just a testament to saying, oh yeah, you should attack in the main when you can, but now this is vulnerable. Yeah, there's a ton of cannons here, but you know what? It's vulnerable. This is vulnerable. This is really vulnerable. Good little Zerg is going to be loading up, going to be trying to run away. Should be careful because KiwiKaki will pick off an Overlord. But still, we're seeing a little bit of danger happen for KiwiKaki. A little bit of danger. It looks like Zerg's going to be continuing to regroup, going to be bringing all these spine crawlers. Slow as they may be, he will be bringing them over here to set up at this gold expansion. So now it's going to be a little gold versus gold action. And this is actually getting increasingly kind of intense and close here. Looks like, yep, continuing to do some good old transfuses on all of those Ultralisks. And this is the really smart thing that KiwiKaki's doing. This directly relates to what we were saying earlier. When KiwiKaki just had 3 bases, here's one of these like late game examples that's so important to go over. A long time ago, like maybe at the I would say at like the 25-minute mark, when KiwiKaki had lost his main and had these 3 bases up, he was making an almost all gateway unit army, almost all Stalkers and Zealots, and just a dash of Templar. Those units that, again, cheap on money, but really expensive in terms of food. 2 food per unit and only 100 minerals, or even 125 minerals and 50 gas. Wow, that's costly. KiwiKaki needed to do that because he needed to both get enough units to stay alive, because he just lost his main, and because he wanted to put pressure back on his opponent. Then that would allow him to get up this gold. So great, KiwiKaki has the gold up. What should he do now? He should begin investing in units that are expensive on money and low on food. These big power units like the Immortals, like the motherships, like carriers, like Void Rays. All these Immortals are coming out, sure, because you know what? Immortals are good against Ultralisks. Everyone can look up a sheet of paper and realize that. But you know what? Even if there were, some more Hydras and Zerglings in that force, we want more Archons, and we want more Templar, and we want some Stalkers and some Immortals. We want fewer Zealots as we're getting to the max point, assuming that we have a good position to be able to do a very patient, strong push. And here comes this probe line. KiwiKaki knows that he doesn't need to just max out on probes. He can easily just sack them. Gonna go into the mineral line. Gonna clear that up a little bit. Cool, good. And KiwiKaki is now playing surprisingly patient. Is that good? Is that bad? Oh, and you know what? Look at this. All Archons could have easily morphed in Zealots. Look at that money. It's so tempting to say to yourself, yeah, you know what? Let me morph in some Zealots so I can keep both kind of low. No way. Let your money get high. Spend your gas. You want gas-heavy units in the late game. So we're going to see KiwiKaki sort of regroup. And look at this same logic coming up. Look at this same logic. Whoops, I alt-tabbed in the wrong fashion. Yes, I did not mean to alt-tab at all. Yeah, alright. Moving forward with this huge push. We're about to hit 7,000 minerals for KiwiKaki. This is an opportune time to do a 300 food push. Lots of good 300 food push timings. If you're going to drill one location, make certain that you're going to be able to reinforce that push. Or, alternatively, attack lots of disparate locations. Lots of locations spread out all across the map. And you'll be doing oh so much damage galore. So let's wait for these Archons to pop up into the battle. Looks like the Broodlords are, of course, doing some damage. This is something that the Zerg player should have been doing for quite some time. But here comes the push. Now, let's look at the production tab in the middle of this. First of all, Protoss' army is so strong. It's so good. I mean, just look at this composition. I mean, like, well, looks like XlorD had a lot of money himself. We see, you know, look, there's a 300 food style move there. Putting a lot of Roaches and Hydras. There's a very Archon-esque toilet coming up. Okay, and here comes everything popping out. I actually just love looking at the resource station when this sort of thing happens. Get in there, little Archons. Oh! Well, it wasn't as potent as I would have considered. But at this point in time, KiwiKaki doing a little bit too much time focusing on the battle and not enough on replenishing a huge giant-ass army. There's some stuff there, but that push sort of petered out. There was not enough drilling into it. And we see, why did Zerg win? Because he had stuff coming to the front of the field the whole time. Let's end up pulling it back, pulling it back, pulling it back, pulling it back, pulling it back. B. Alright, yep, look at this. All these units popping out for Zerg. Look at all those units popping out. There's virtually no more of the big units left for XlorD. There's no more little units left. It's just a couple of Ultras, right, that are getting chewed through. There's these Broodlords. KiwiKaki is so close to holding it, but then here these Roaches come waddling in. Probably could have picked off those two Ultras, but man, look at everything else just swarming in. Swarming in! So, of course, we see more Immortals get produced, and, tragically enough, not enough production was coming out of all of these other gateways. Is going to get bustoed. I think that was kind of a misstep by KiwiKaki, to be honest. The fact that he wasn't replenishing aggressively. Now I see him starting to put some stuff back on the map. Because at this point in time, you can just drill it really hard. Even though Zealots aren't the best unit at this point in time, you can get a lot of them so quickly, and we see tons of Immortals getting produced. Again, if you want to be doing the drill and just slamming through one region all at once, do that. Drill it hard. Like, really, really commit to it. KiwiKaki is investing in a little bit more of the straightforward calm push. Still, I'd like to note, no attempt to do anything to here. One Warp Prism, a set of Blink Stalkers popping up could have done a lot of damage. Could have done a lot of damage. Oh, we have the probes participating in the fight as well. That's nifty-tastic. And you're noticing that at this point in the game, there's a lot of composition questions. There's a lot of attacking hither and thither. Gosh, that's cool. I love that play so much. There's a lot of that sort of discussion that I'm doing sort of consistently. And that is because In the late game stages, it's all about the composition, where you're attacking, how you're sort of peeling things apart, and a lot about movement of units. A lot about where you move stuff around, especially in the Terran matchups. That is true. And interestingly, we're getting to a point where you're going to have to be the MacGyver Protoss. You're going to have to figure out, how can I win with 1,800 minerals, a couple of paper clips, and a half mined out gold expansion? That is a situation that we see our lovely little Protoss player in. And amazingly enough, XlorD is able to get this expansion up and is able to be fine. KiwiKaki didn't do enough pressure there. We do see some Void Rays coming out, which could potentially be an interesting little mix. But KiwiKaki has essentially dedicated himself to being all-in at this point in time. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. This is actually going to be really close. Broodlord's advancing up. I actually have to go in a little bit, so this is an enticing end to the series. This game has been absurdly epic. Look at KiwiKaki completely mined out. Here comes the mothership coming up. Uh-oh, be careful, little mothership. Getting the Broodlords in the back. Everything getting sucked in. Oh, there's no Archons. Oh my god. Oh my god. That would have been the sickest thing known to man. And by the way, I think if you hit hold position, you can trap units a little bit more effectively. Oh, storms! Yeah, and even you can feed back the Overseers. Never forget that. Oh my god, did that actually just happen? KiwiKaki. KiwiKaki. Oh. That was amazing. That kicked ass. I don't know how else to put that. That was just the awesomest thing I think I've ever seen. What the hell? What in the hell? Alright, no amount of analysis can ever trump how awesome that was. Awesome! Yes, XlorD. Thank you for your contribution to the entertainment value of the netizens of the world. And the push crushes through the middle. Now KiwiKaki can begin mining at the goal, but he may have sacked 100% of his probes. This may be his final play. We see that XlorD still has money, so he's beginning to churn out some Zerglings. No more Templar in the force, but looks like that expansion's going to go down. This expansion's going to go down. Oh my gosh. Kiwi, the MacGyver Protoss. Oh my god, the MacGyver toss strikes again. I cannot believe that happened. I cannot believe. I'm gonna be able to calm down and do like a recap in a second. But that was amazing. That was unbelievable. The MacGyver toss. Look at him. MYM XlorD. Oh my gosh. I'm actually speechless. I cannot believe that was that effective. XlorD has so much more units, a little bit better focus and control. And it looks like the game will be going into the win category for our good friend Root Gaming's KiwiKaki. Holy crap. Oh my gosh. Nice. Wow, that was cool. Alright, okay. Okay, so this is what I want to do. What I want to talk about now is what went wrong in the last little bit of time there. We're going to do this end part, and then I'll probably take one question. Just one brief question. Now, for KiwiKaki, right as he is getting up this little force, there's no reason that there can't be pushes to here and planting guys here and doing storming there. There's absolutely no reason that that cannot be a focus. That should have been going on way earlier, because I'm curious how XlorD was able to even get this up in the first place. XlorD, by the same token, we saw do so much damage that he ended up being a little bit ahead in the final stages of the game. So he should have been doing more Nidus Worms here, more dropping here, more dropping here. And because one of the big questions I always get asked is, you know, is there a good way to use Nidus Worms? People think about the unit, and then they just go, well, how do I do that? You know, they go, do you think drops are good? Do you think Nidus Worms are good? The answer is, hitting a player at a lot of different locations at once is good. Figure out a way to do that. Nidus Worms drops? Yeah, now they are helping to satisfy that little conclusion. So, what I wanted to note out of this game, the big thing, is exactly what I noted at the start. That both of them opened up with their builds. KiwiKaki is a little unusual, but let's not even think about whether it's unorthodox or not. He opened up with a style, and generally those players are going to be ending their games very, very, very quickly. But there's a point where, it looks like we're kind of in the late game. And when you're in the late game, you need to think about trying to pry out weaknesses. You need to think about doing damage to the expansions and watching the expansions, and in particular doing a lot of attacks at different locations of the map at the same time. So that way you can kind of peel their defense out a little bit. It's all going to revolve around the expansion, and too much passivity can be fatal. It was nearly fatal for KiwiKaki. The fact that after he recovered, he got a little passive, and after XlorD killed that whole main and sort of got his footing again, got a little passive. You can actually drill things pretty effectively, and it'll feel like you're kind of being inefficient. But if you have a superior resource advantage, it's actually entirely possible for XlorD around this point in the game. Actually, a little farther forward, around the 30-minute mark. It's entirely possible for XlorD to have begun drilling this and drilling this part so hard that XlorD could get up this expansion. End this expansion. XlorD would have been violently inefficient, would have had virtually no good measure of efficiency at all, just hurling units at KiwiKaki. But he would have had 2 gold expansions up, and KiwiKaki would have just lost the war of attrition. Let's go ahead and let's just take one more question. Let's take one more question. Let's take one more question. Take one more question. Let's see here. Prayz1 says, Dear Day 9, when you approach endgame and start mining out the map, when is the point where you should start thinking about switching to more cost-effective units instead of poking with cost-inefficient units? Generally, that ends up happening when you kind of can clearly not deny his expansions anymore. Anytime you have an absolute inability to deny his expansion count, you should try to start thinking about the more efficient, cleaner armies. Notice what I said applies to any stage of the game. For instance, a Zerg player going mass Mutalisk Zergling and expanding a ton. It's really hard to deny the Zerg the expansions because the Mutaling are so fast and because there's harassment all over the place. So you know what, in those circumstances, just make good mixes of units, and as you're approaching the max point, get the better mix of whatever. Like Immortals and Archons and all that good stuff. If you are if you're a Zerg player who's trying to build up a huge army to be able to hold off an attack, then you're probably going to not go for a really big cost-effective army. You're probably just going to be maxing up on roaches very, very, very quickly. Kind of typical sorts of things that you end up seeing. But I want everyone to know, watch more expansions, attack things in different locations, and keep in mind that your normal build should be winning 99.9% of the time. For next week's Fun Day Monday, if you'd be so kind as to submit to Monday at Day 9 TV improv casting suggestions for me. Every 3 to 5 minutes when I'm casting on Monday, I will do a different constraint that you submit. For instance, saying no words that start with the letter P, you know, like something like that. I want to see you give me some creative suggestions, and the admins will help me sort through them and pick a whole bunch. I'll be drawing them out of a hat in the game, so it will be a lot of good fun. For next week's Newbie Tuesday, I have a prepared topic, so just sit back and relax. And of course, have a good weekend. Bye!